I'll find him.
When Silent Hill 5 was announced, the main feelings around the internet seemed to revolve around bitching that Team Silent wasn't working on it, and bitching that Americans were making it. Because bitching is the most popular sport on the internet. The fact that the main character was a soldier didn't help matters. Harry Mason could barely hit something 2 feet away with a shotgun, and that added to his everyman appeal. The designers don't specify what war he was in, assuming it would be one from the real world anyway, or where he was because they don't want to get political, according to articles. It seems like a plot device to make him good with weapons, though, and to have a reason that he's been away from home to begin with, and he starts off after having been injured in the hospital. He returns home, and his father and brother are gone. His mom acts weird, and there are no photos of him in the house anymore. Apparently the monsters are smarter and faster to make up for the fact that Alex is better with weapons. I remember when the old Silent Hill forum.co.uk forums were still up, and someone posted magazine scans. Alex and Elle both looked different in this concept art, and apparently this was seen as problematic, that they were too good looking. Perhaps people thought an every man, every woman sort of look was better. And they were both changed in the final version. The game also uses the Havoc physics engine, which means that in-game objects can move around in a more realistic way. You can bump into things, causing them to move around, make noise, and even attract attention to you. There are quite a few new monsters, and I think this is one area in which the game really shines. There are monsters obviously inspired by older monsters, like how the Smog resembles the Lion figures, but with new details. Siam is huge, and has bandaged arms resembling those of the Closers in Silent Hill 3, but that's where the similarities end. To get the movement just right, the team used actors wearing motion capture suits. Others take the inspiration a bit too far, like Pyramid Head, and how the nurses are taken directly from the first film, with their short skirts, huge amounts of cleavage, and the fact that they respond much to the flashlight, or lack thereof. There is another version of the familiar dog enemy, and the flying swarm insects bring to mind the Hummers in Silent Hill 4, but are more irritating. They latch onto Alex, and he asks to button mash to remove them. There are a lot of monsters that move in spider or insect-like ways, which is a nice change from a lot of the misshapen humanoids in the past. The bosses are especially well done, and have atmospheric music and surroundings. Scarlet is pretty fucking scary, and uses the whole creepy doll idea well. Others have spider legs or resemble centipedes. There is also a mechanical aspect to some of the creatures. The Needlers walk around on blades which replace their limbs. And while I'm talking about monsters and combat, the over-the-top violence, often towards other humans, is another vast difference between this game and most of the others. Some have made comparisons to films like Hostel, which were popular at the time and featured gratuitous, over-the-top violence towards regular people rather than human on monster violence. It's very bloody and features some crazy shit happening to people. It's a different take on the violence that has always been part of the series, and is not to everyone's taste. I think this kind of blood and gore go well in zombie games, but less so in Silent Hill, where the story usually takes a front seat. And on that note, the story is also not my favorite part of this. It starts out okay. Alex isn't sure what's going on, people are reacting to him strangely. He's been away for a while, and we guess he was off to war. He meets up with an old friend, Elle, who is angry that he didn't say goodbye to her before leaving, among other characters. His mom seems like a kook, and he has a strange and cold relationship with his father.
You know this place is off limits. I don't ever want to see you in here again.
We don't understand why this is until later. Spoilers, of course. The 4 families broke off from the cult of Silent Hill a while back, and they had to sacrifice children to keep bad shit from happening. It was Alex's family's turn. Dad treated Alex like shit because they didn't want to get attached to him, but Josh ended up dying before Alex was sacrificed. This screwed everything up. Josh wasn't the sacrifice. Some of the details escape me here and never made a lot of sense to me in the first place. Everyone seems to think sacrificing children is just a fine and dandy thing to do. And then, the part that ruins the whole story. Alex wasn't a soldier. He wanted to be one, like his dad, but he had to but he had been locked up in a mental hospital. He didn't go to war. The dog tags are explained as being Adam Shepard's, but how is he good with weapons? Puzzles are not the strong point of the game. There are throwbacks to Origins with a puzzle involving a code on X-ray film. There are a lot of things with sliders, supposedly to make it seem more like the puzzles make sense in the environment in which they are found. However, Silent Hill puzzles were never like that. They involved things like riddles about birds you solve using piano keys, Alice in Wonderland-inspired tiles found around a hospital, and even complete nonsense like the time you run around getting codes and keys to get a piece of hair. There are also things taken from Silent Hill Origins, most notably an older and gruffer version of Travis still driving his truck. There are some mirror-related transitions to the Otherworld and iron lungs in the hospital. Speaking of the hospital, though, it's still called Alchemilla Hospital, like in the first game in Origins, but now it's a mental hospital. Seeing as Silent Hill already had a mental hospital, I'm not seeing the need to change their regular hospital to a psychiatric hospital. There are wheelchairs and fans reminiscent of Silent Hill 3, and a pain-in-the-ass kid like there was in Silent Hill 2. And of course, Robbie comes back as a doll belonging to Alex's kid brother. While the combat is generally pretty decent, I have to mention how much I hate QuickTime events. They suck! Another thing from Origins that I'd prefer stayed in Origins. Also, there is the issue of the graphics. A lot of the things in 2 and 3 still look pretty fucking great. In particular, the detail in the characters' faces, like Heather's freckles and the redness around her eyes. Even her hair wasn't half bad for the time. I guess characters like Eileen in Part 4 still look decent. And Homecoming was supposed to be for a next-gen console compared to those. It was the first game that came out on the PS3, yet the character skins and the attention to detail, even in the surroundings, seemed like a big step backward to me. Plastic-looking hair, teeth that look kinda bad in the cutscenes, smooth skin devoid of unique characteristics. If you look through the textures in 2 or 3, or, play the games, you'll notice that all those little details in every level really stand out. Not just the characters' faces and clothing, but things like posters in rooms, graffiti outside and in the apartment buildings. In the amusement park, there are even Robbie costumes and dead things you can barely make out in-game. Huge amounts of detail in the environment. Great color schemes that invoke a sense of horror. Homecoming, on the other hand, is a lot of gray and brown, almost nondescript. Certain areas have interesting details, like the book on anal sex on Alex's bookcase, but by and large, this often seems like a weak point. Of course, there are cool-looking areas like Hell Descent, but not enough of them. One of my biggest qualms is actually the idea of an overly Silent Hill film-inspired transition to the Otherworld, where walls dynamically meld away. Sure, it sounds cool, and I thought the movie was okay, and this looks cool in the game, but anything that reminds me too much of the movie makes me a bit uneasy. This is another reason I don't like the busty nurses. Too film-inspired on one hand, and on the other, too Silent Hill 2 inspired. James had the faceless nurses. Alex should have had something else. James had Pyramid Head. Alex should have had something else. Pyramid Head was supposed to be in more scenes, I've heard, but he's still in one too many. And it's just a lame cameo that could have been done by another monster. He just looks at the camera and attacks another character. Lame. Overall, though, I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be. It's playable as long as you don't have the PC version, which was tremendously broken. It had its strong points, but not enough to measure up to some of the previous games. The soundtrack is also great, and should be mentioned as a high point of the game. Some parts of the game were legitimately creepy, and I liked several of the monsters and bosses. The endings are a big letdown, and some of the visual aspects are disappointing. It was still worth playing in my opinion, especially if you've already played the others to death and need something new.